Production of Ruckus is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Ruckus, our weekly food for thought fight over the news of the day and the trends of the times. I'm Mike Shannon. The Ruckettes join me shortly. Our topics this week: Tuesday's elections, local, regional, and national. The panel will summarize, analyze, theorize, and hypothesize, plus, of course, roast and toast. But we start with our Newsmaker segment and focus on City Hall in Kansas City, Missouri, and some of the major issues being considered there. Joining us for the discussion is a first-term council member who represents the 1st District north of the river in Clay County. Our guest was born in St. Louis, grew up in Leawood, graduated from K-State, and runs her own marketing firm. We're pleased to welcome to Ruckus Councilwoman Heather Hall of Kansas City, Missouri. Ms. Hall, welcome. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Now, you've been in office, I believe, about a year, and this is the first elective office you've served in?
That's correct. 14 months we've been in office now.
What is it like you thought it would be?
Oh, and then some.
What surprises you about being on the City Council? What did you not expect?
Well, I guess I really didn't expect how passionate the citizens really are about specific issues that concern our neighborhoods. I knew people cared, but by the numbers in the elections, it didn't seem like they really cared that much. And when you really get out and meet with them, you find out that they really do, and they're passionate about the same things we are. We just didn't communicate very well to talk to them to find out earlier.
You talked about several key areas when you ran for office. One was public safety.
That's right.
How do you think Kansas City is doing in that regard? The homicide toll is pretty high again.
You know, it really is very high, and that's such a detriment to our city.
What do you want done in public safety that's not being done now?
Well, I don't think they're doing anything wrong in public safety. What it is that we just have a very large city. We have 319 square miles. We have 460,000 people, and it's a huge, vast place to get around. And our police officers are doing the best they can with the resources they have. What I'm hopeful is that we give them an opportunity to have more officers on the streets to do different things, to really help with the community policing and getting to know the people in their neighborhoods so that the relationship between the police officers and the neighborhoods can be stronger and be built
There's
to
a
be more trusting.
long-running argument about whether Kansas City, Missouri should control the police department,
Yes.
or, as it is now, the state control the police department. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, as it stands right now, I think it's been run very well by the state. We have a long history with the state running it, and we've done very well with that. But at the same time, you can only be the only one in the whole country for only so much more time.
Yeah.
So I believe that eventually it's inevitable for that to happen. I just want to make sure that everything's in place to make it a successful transition when and if that does occur.
And your husband is on the police department in Kansas City.
He is. He's been on for 24 years. So.
Is that difficult at all? Being in City Hall and controlling a lot of what goes on in the city and having a husband working on the police department?
No, it's really not. You know, he does his job and he's great at what he does. And so I admire him and the other officers that are on the streets every day and the people who are doing that. I admire that, and I'm glad they're doing it.
They have a lot to contend with, don't they?
They do, and you know, all of us do. So we really have to give each other some grace.
You're from north of the river, as they say, and historically, I think the Northland has felt mistreated or maybe ignored by City Hall. I assume that is changing and that you're working to try to change that perception. And if that's a reality, you're trying to change that as well.
Yes, I think that is a correct perception that you have, that you're saying the people have. However, I believe the people in the Northland feel like they're very much a part of Kansas City in total, and I think what we want to do is just bring that, bridge that gap over the Missouri River and say, you know, really you can go across the river and everything's still going to be okay. And so we're working on that.
You talk a lot about entrepreneurship, and you are an entrepreneur yourself. What needs to be done? What's going on in Kansas City to promote that concept?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Today is the beginning of Global Entrepreneurship Week, and what that means is that across the world, people in this, who like entrepreneurs, who are entrepreneurs, who have services that benefit entrepreneurs, are all coming together to help keep them doing what they do best. So maybe I'm really good at X, but I don't know how to do the legal or the accounting. Well, there are all these other people who bring together a wealth of knowledge to do that. And you know, the exciting thing about Global Entrepreneurship Week is that was started in Kansas City at the Kauffman Foundation. You know, Mr. Kauffman created the Kauffman Foundation to help entrepreneurs. The Kauffman Foundation created Global Entrepreneurship Week, and today we now have Global Entrepreneurship Week starting in Kansas City now in 160 countries worldwide because of his forethought so many years ago.
A couple of really quick questions, and I hope really quick answers.
Yes.
Do your constituents want a new KCI, a new one-terminal airport?
Well, when I ran for office, they all said no to me. I knocked on a whole lot of doors, and all of those doors, I think maybe one person said they'd like a new one. Many of them said, we need to refurbish it and we need to revitalize it, but we don't want a new one.
How disappointed are you that Clay Chastain's light rail plan did not pass?
I'm neither disappointed or not disappointed. You know, I think that when you do any light rail or streetcar, you need to follow 90% of the flow of the commuter traffic, and whatever that looks like should be the thing that we would
Well,
do.
Clay said this would be the last attempt. Do you think it really will be?
You know, I don't know. I've met him one time and I've talked to him, and I would hope that, you know, we all say what we believe and that we're going to stick with what we say. But
He says what he believes, trust me.
well, then maybe then we have to hold him. We have to believe what he says.
Thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate it, and nice meeting you.
Well, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That is Kansas City, Missouri Councilwoman Heather Hall from the 1st District. Now let's meet the panel and see if we can start a ruckus. Teresa Garza is a former Jackson County legislator, now with Lincoln Consulting. Patrick Toohey is field manager at the Show Me Institute, a libertarian think tank. Steve Glorioso is a political and media consultant. And attorney Steve Marakian is with the firm of Warsh, Hobbs and Marakian. Good to see all of you again. Thanks for coming in. There's a lot to talk about, so let's get started. The polls said Hillary Clinton was supposed to be the 45th president of the United States, but the voters did not get the memo. In the biggest political upset in decades, billionaire Donald J. Trump won the election and blocked the lifelong hopes of Secretary Clinton to become the first woman president of the United States. So, Steve Glorioso, what did the analysts and pollsters miss along the way?
Well, first of all, you know, the poll, they always tell you within the margin of error, and that it was never so true as it was this time. As we now know that Hillary Clinton was the people's choice for American president, she did get more popular vote. It might end up being 1.5% margin of victory over Trump. The polling was averaged around 3. So having said that...
but that doesn't mean anything. You can win the electoral vote, or you can win the popular vote and still not become president.
Well, I understand that, Mike,
so,
okay? I got it.
Well, I mean,
but it's a rigged system, and we knew
it's
that.
It's a rigged system.
You know, for the second time in 20 years, the Democrat has won the election and the popular vote. But nonetheless, the point I'm making is that I don't know that the pollsters are that far off. I think the problem, as I understand it, were the state polls, which are done often by newspapers and local polling groups. And I think then, of course, the vote by uneducated whites was such higher than most people thought, and also the polling reflected that.
Is that true? Uneducated whites were the only ones who voted for Donald Trump?
No, not
sorry,
I'm talking about I'm talking
now.
about the margin. But let me one quick example. In Texas County in Missouri, Trump got 81% of the vote. That's way down, down toward the deep South.
Well, I think the point here is this: the reason Hillary Clinton lost is not because of, as I've been hearing on some issues, of racism, or people don't want a woman president, or uneducated whites. The fact of the matter is, Donald Trump won amongst the independent, college-educated whites. He won heavily against white males. And Hillary, where she lost was, quite frankly, and this has to do with the fact that people just were fed up with the degree of corruption and dishonesty. They did not want Hillary. She didn't get enough of the black vote. She was down from what Obama had. She got most of it, but only 88%. She didn't get anywhere near enough of the Hispanic vote, Latino vote. That was down from what they expected. And she only won amongst women. This is the amazing thing. 54 to 42.
Yeah, Teresa, she didn't get that much of the women's vote. It wasn't overwhelming.
Well, and what I saw, I think, this morning was that she scored very highly among educated women across the board, whether they were, regardless of race or anything. So she did get a lot of the women's vote that had not previously come out or had voted one way or the other in the past and chose to go out and cast a vote for a female. So I don't, I think it depends on what you're looking at and how you're, interpreting the actual data. So I don't know if I would agree with you on that, Steve, because she did get quite a bit of the female vote.
All right, a president does not govern alone. It's often critical for the president to have a Congress controlled by his own party. willing to consider his policy priorities. Well, Trump, of course, is going to have a Republican Congress. We think he's a Republican. But is it likely to be in sync with his policy preferences, or do we know what his policy preferences are? Patrick?
Well, that's a good question. Maureen Dowd.
That's why I asked it.
Maureen Dowd had a column the other day that kind of said we don't know which Donald Trump is going to show up if he's elected. And I think Republicans are interested in seeing the same thing. We have kind of an opportunity, I think, for an ascendant Congress to assert its authority.
Take back some control from the executive?
That's right, because we have a president who isn't necessarily in line with a lot of what Republicans might want, or at least what he wants. Republicans don't want. But that's actually exciting because we may end up with an agenda from the Trump administration that includes big building projects, infrastructure, roads, a wall, school choice, and an immigration policy that doesn't hew to party lines.
Steve Glorioso, let's wrap it up with this question. What does this election tell us about the mood of the American people?
Well, people are angry, and they're angry for a lot of reasons. A lot of my friends, including myself, I don't like what's going on in Washington. Different reason, of course. I think the real problem that Trump will have is that 75% of registered voters in the United States did not vote for Donald Trump. So the Congress is going to have to deal with the fact he has no mandate whatsoever, losing the popular vote, having 3 out of every 4 voters not vote for him. And I think it's going to be up to the leaders, the more reasonable people in Congress, Paul Ryan probably, to try to make sense out from a madman who we've elected as president.
I disagree with Steve entirely. He does have a mandate in this sense. What the Democrats are desperately trying to ignore is this, okay? This was an absolute, clear, and undeniable repudiation of the Barack Obama agenda that Hillary was going to follow. We won with a president, okay, Trump wins, who nobody could have seen. The Republicans did not get swept away. They actually prevailed, losing far less than they should have. They have both houses. They picked up governorships. This is now an opportunity, as Patrick was saying, if they work together with an agenda that's good for America, they can make some actual change. But they have repudiated the last 8 years of Obama.
All right, now let's take a look at the state of Missouri. 2 charismatic men faced each other in the governor's race. Democrat Chris Koster, the state attorney general, faced only token opposition in the primary. Republican Eric Greitens, a political novice, won the nomination in a 4-way battle, and the Navy SEAL went on to win Tuesday's election in a decisive manner. So, Teresa, a lot of people thought Koster was a shoo-in. Did Greitens win primarily because he was the outsider in the race in a year of the outsider?
I think that has a lot to do with it. Everybody, like you said, thought Koster had it and was going to sell into victory. That didn't happen. I think that does have a lot to do with the fact that people are tired of the status quo and what that looks like and entails. And so they definitely went out and they voted against anyone who has been part of an elected office before or government in whatever capacity. And so I think that is very accurate in that sense. You know, it is a big disappointment to see how it played out in Missouri, but then at the same time, it's not shocking or surprising.
Patrick, we've had a Democratic governor in Missouri for the past 8 years. What does it mean to have a Republican governor in Missouri with a Republican-controlled legislature? What will change?
Well, we'll probably see a lot of legislation that Governor Nixon vetoed become law. Union policy, we'll see what happens there. Right to work, exactly. But again, it's going to be kind of an established legislature that looks at a new governor, maybe with some skepticism. But let me talk one more thing about what happened in Missouri. We talked a lot before the election about Jason Kander and his youth, but with the exception of our lieutenant governor, I think the oldest member of who won statewide office in Missouri is Jay Ashcroft, who's 43. Missouri has an incredible bench of people going into the future. And by comparison, let's talk about the Democrats in Washington. They will be led now by Nancy Pelosi and Charles Schumer, and they will have an ascendant Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren to lead the party. And I don't think that's a good recipe for them in the future.
Steve Glorioso, Missouri side congressional races, did all the incumbents win?
There were no surprises. The districts are gerrymandered to the point that there are certain ones Democrats will probably always win and Republicans will always win. The Koster, Greitens won Greitens because he had a bigger gun. That's the only thing I can do. You saw he was blowing up everything, and now he says he's going to blow up Jeff City, some of which I think would be positive. But he, although appears to be far more rational and certainly more intelligent than Trump, he goes to Jeff City having been an outsider and actually attacking members of his own party. I'm going to do lobby reform. I'm going to, drain the swamp in Jeff City. So that'll be fascinating. But Patrick's right. The changes will be pretty dramatic because there's no balance anymore. I thought Koster, one of the problems Koster had is he didn't have the overwhelming support of his own party. When the NRA endorsed him and the Missouri Farm Bureau endorsed him, a lot of liberals within the party, the air went out of the sail for Chris Koster. He might have still won had Comey not come out with that last-minute interference in the election and changed the last week of the
so
election.
Jacob Turk did not win the race against Emmanuel Cleaver?
Well, you gotta keep trying.
He keeps trying.
Moving now to Kansas, a lot of interest in the 3rd District congressional battle where incumbent Kevin Yoder faced a first-time candidate, Democrat Jay Sidey. Sidey was the outsider, but did it make any difference when people got inside the voting booth? Steve Marakian.
No, and quite frankly, I thought Sidey did a little better than I expected, but not even really close when you get right down to it. Yoder's very popular, and Sidey tried to tie him to Trump in the hope that the people in Johnson County were going to vote against Trump, and that didn't even pan out the way they hoped it would. Yoder was a shoo-in. He won. He's a good congressman. He should have won. There really was nothing big in Kansas. Lynn Jenkins, Jerry Moran. I mean, everyone who should have won and was expected to win, did win. I think the biggest thing that surprised me was I was surprised by the margin of the Trump victory. He's not popular in Johnson County, and he won far bigger than I had expected.
What about the Kansas legislature? There was a big effort to try to get more moderate Republicans and Democrats into the
and it was sort of a mixed bag. There was a slight move to what you would call the middle, if you will. Some of the people that were elected, particularly in the part of the state, the city where I live, in Lenexa and so forth, and that side. Tom Cox, Dinah Sykes, people who had portrayed themselves as being more moderate Republicans, they won. But then there were some that were very stridently conservative, Brownback supporters, like Mary Pilcher Cook, and she was reelected. It wasn't a massive shift. It'll be a little bit more to the middle. A few Democrats won that were not to change the balance. Quite
we're going to
frankly,
see big changes in Topeka?
No, it's not. You're not going to see big changes, but you're going to see, I think,
Patrick,
a little bit
the
more.
Supreme Court justices were all retained.
That's
the 5 who were on the ballot, and that means what? I assume that we'll see school finance approval by the High Court fairly soon.
The House of Representatives in Kansas went to a 3-1 Republican majority to a 2-1 Republican majority. So we'll see, but I think everybody's entrenched.
But the
and not
Supreme
much
Court's
change.
going to
That's a lot of
okay the
progress.
increase in money for the schools, I would think.
I think so as well.
Don't you
but
think
we'll
they'll
see.
feel emboldened? The judges,
Well, I would think so. I think they would go ahead and
your
move as
attorney
quickly
over
as
there,
possible.
They may
That's
feel
what I
like
would
now
think,
they
too.
really can go the extra mile.
All right, there is still much
Especially
to
since they
talk
went
about,
overwhelmingly.
so we're going to call this segment Etc. There were questions on the ballots, propositions, amendments, and perhaps the 10th and last appearance of a Clay Chastain light rail plan in Kansas City, Missouri. Clay said right on this program and elsewhere, if this one does not pass, he's finished. So, Teresa, did it pass, and do you believe he's finished?
It did not pass, and no, I do not believe he is finished. Again, I mean, the voters in Kansas City continue to say no to his plan, but he keeps coming back, revising it, and so forth. And so it is what it is, and we'll see what happens. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you something very interesting. I always like to look at results, which I mentioned earlier. His plan, first of all, he got 78,000 votes for the goofy plan, and it passed in the wards down where my wife and I live in the Crossroads, in wards, well, it doesn't matter, 1, 4, and 5, Westport downtown. He actually got 55, 56%.
Do you think people confused it with streetcars?
No, I don't. I just think well, I'm a millennial now that I live in the Crossroads, of course, but the people
You
who
turn
live
back time.
in my part of the city are actually, young enough to be my grandkids. And I just think, like when he passed it many years ago, people just, a certain group
Right.
want mass transit.
Right, they want mass
and they
transit,
voted even for a
absolutely.
bad plan.
This idea that we keep voting against Clay Chastain's plan so he should go away. I mean, we keep voting against the city's plan, yet it never goes away. And let me
Okay,
tell you,
a valid point.
if I were a streetcar supporter in Kansas City, I look at the Trump election as a sign that federal funds for streetcars is going to dry up.
There were 2 cigarette tax proposals on the Missouri ballot. What happened to those, Steve? Did they pass?
You know, no, they failed. We certainly need to increase our cigarette tax, but they were both Trojan horses for other issues. And you know, the ballot was so confusing. It really was. I have a lot of people call me, leading on, what do you think? I had to go get something and remind myself what was number 3 and what was Prop A, and it was people. I think when special issues, when in doubt, or people are confused, they default to no. And it was so confusing that people, I think, voted no who might have been for them.
But the one they didn't vote no on was the one that everybody wants
Photo
throughout
ID.
the whole country, except for our progressive judges who will never allow it. Voter ID passed by about 2/3.
Well, they have no choice now. It's an amendment to
I
the
understand,
Constitution.
but believe me, there will still be
That
legal
doesn't mean
challenges.
anything?
And I guarantee you there will be a federal judge somewhere who will say, you simply cannot ask Steve's grandmother to show a photo ID.
They better
Right.
not. She'll break their kneecaps.
Right.
But by the way, campaign spending limits passed.
That's true. And
Yeah,
that's
talk
also
about
one
talk.
challenge.
limits did pass also.
What was it? 2,500
It mirrors the
or
federal.
2,600 per
It mirrors the
person?
federal.
Yeah.
25,000.
We'll see if this will be a curious one for the new governor. The Republican legislature basically flipped the bird to the public when they did it once before and just eliminated limits. If they try it again, I presume the governor could veto. It sounds like Greitens, even though he got a lot of money, big checks, if he wants reform, he might be for that.
That might be one.
There was a big issue in Johnson County wanting a quarter-cent sales tax increase for a decade, I believe. The money would go to build a new courthouse in Olathe and a coroner's facility in Olathe or somewhere in Johnson County. That passed.
Yes.
Was that significant? Was it a
I think it
significant
was.
number?
I think it shows, in my mind, it shows that Johnson County voters continue to be very knowledgeable about what's good for themselves and, quite frankly, good for the state. This is an important issue, not for the state, but at least for Johnson County. We need a new courthouse. We need a new medical examiner's facility. These are things that have, you have to have some progress. And people who I've been as strident as anybody against willy-nilly tax increases. But there are taxes that are good, and in my view, this is a good project. This is not just fluff. We need a new courthouse, and people approved it.
Hey, trial lawyer wants new courthouse. Shocking.
Wait a second.
And I bet he's on
self-interest.
campaign.
In interest of full
Self-interest.
disclosure, I am a trial
Donor
lawyer.
list.
I want a better courthouse.
There you go.
There was a question about the Mid-Continent Library System on the ballot, and it gained approval. What was it? What was it about?
So basically, they wanted to increase the levy a little bit. They've had their budget frozen, I think, since '85.
85, yeah. I think
But
that's
what
right.
I wanted people in Jackson County to understand, and the people who voted on this around the area, is that this is a TIF tax. Because the city of Kansas City has been diverting library funds to developers for so long, libraries are starved, and so they have to go to the people to replace the money that was given to Burns and Mack.
All right.
Right.
Now we're going to head to the soapbox for Roast and Toast, where the Ruckettes sound elated or deflated about people and events in the news. And we start with Teresa.
I am actually going to toast veterans since tomorrow is Veterans Day. So to my fellow shipmates and everyone that is serving and has served and will continue to serve, happy Veterans Day.
Let's see, that would be Mr. Marakian and me. And that would be it. wouldn't it?
You were fighting the Kong.
I was on freedom's frontier. Steve Marakian.
I'm roasting myself for being so slow to understand that despite all his faults, Donald Trump, like Ronald Reagan, is a leader of a movement that is far bigger than the man himself. By criticizing his nomination, I demeaned millions of Americans of all races, sex, and backgrounds who have now chosen to elect him to change this country's course. I'm proud to say I came around at the end. I am ashamed to say that it took me so long and that I was so arrogant in my vocal opposition. I apologize to all of you for that.
Well, we don't accept it.
And like a true trial attorney, he wrote it out.
Okay, Patrick.
A toast today to our liberal and progressive friends who are waking up these last 2 mornings with a newfound respect for government restraint, for federalism, and for checks and balances. For the last 8 years, the left have cheered every movement of Obama's pen on executive orders, on ending filibusters, and reducing the checks on the executive. And it's time that they came home and realized that one of the most important parts of the Constitution is the recognition and division of power.
And Steve Dorioso.
I would like to roast some of Trump's supporters. There's certainly Vladimir Putin, who now feels like he can try to dominate Eastern Europe, the Ku Klux Klan, who endorsed him. But more importantly, I went through a bunch of websites in the last 24 hours. Here's one from one of the top al-Qaeda leaders. Rejoice with the support from Allah. that Trump reveals the true mentality of American and their racism toward Muslims and Arabs. He reveals what his predecessors used to conceal, so his victory further exposes America.
All right, and finally, here is a toast to Kellyanne Elizabeth Fitzpatrick Conway, lawyer turned pollster turned campaign manager. Running the Donald Trump campaign, she brought coherence to a sometimes incoherent message. Never at a loss for words, Ms. Conway gave as good as she got in exchanges with media reporters and pundits. One can only hope this miracle worker joins Trump in the White House and moderates some of the new president's more volatile instincts. And one other note, the talk show host Glenn Beck, I happened to hear him the other day, and he said something I thought was rather profound. You may not agree.
Great.
You know, he had been opposed to Donald Trump vehemently throughout the campaign, and he said he was going to take another look at the situation and try to understand. And he said, here's the situation. Trump supporters took him seriously, but not literally. I took him literally, but not seriously. And that is Ruckus for this week. We're back next Thursday at 7. Now for the Ruckettes and the crew, I'm Mike Shannon saying thanks for watching and good night.
Production of Ruckus is made possible through the generous support of Dave and Jamie Cummings, the Hartwig family, and by viewers like you. Thank you.